Ridley Scott, Joaquin Phoenix, Vanessa Kirby, Napoleon Bonaparte. This movie has to be amazing, right?
What is your name?
Napoleon.
Has the course of my life just changed? Napoleon.
Napoleon is the latest film from acclaimed director Ridley Scott, who you may know of from Gladiator, Blade Runner, Alien, and countless other amazing films. This movie stars Vanessa Kirby as Empress Josephine and Joaquin Phoenix as Napoleon Bonaparte. This film essentially follows both the rise and the fall of Napoleon over the course of several decades. I have tremendously mixed feelings about Napoleon. On the one hand, it is epic, but then at times it's also a little bit bloated. It is funny and dramatic, but sometimes it's unsure which direction it wants to lean into. Ultimately, it's a film with tremendous breadth, but sometimes lacking depth on a particular moment or a particular character. Ridley Scott wanted to provide a pretty comprehensive picture of Napoleon's life, so we follow him from the Battle of Toulon in 1793 all the way to his exile and ultimate death in the 1820s. This film has a pretty long runtime, although not anything new for Ridley Scott, at just over 2.5 hours. And he attempts to do so much in this film and cover so much material that we leave kind of wanting a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that. Particularly early on in the film, we bounce around quite quickly to different early moments in Napoleon's life and military career. Obviously, this is here to give us that contextual understanding, that background that can help elevate the rest of the film, but it didn't seem to really add too much to dramatic tension or overall engagement. The story that Scott is ultimately trying to tell here would probably lend itself a little bit better to a TV limited series format, which, interestingly enough, Steven Spielberg is in the works creating, which will be, as of right now, a 7-part series for HBO on Napoleon, kind of building off actually Stanley Kubrick's never produced idea for a very long, in-depth Napoleon film. Because Scott wanted to do so much here, and that attempt is certainly admirable, we sometimes start connecting with a character or really lean into a battle just for it to end and shift somewhere else. While this would ultimately change really the intention of the film, it probably would have been stronger if Scott was willing to give up some of the breadth, perhaps some of the background, certain battles, and really hone in on the story that he wanted to tell. And we're essentially given a few narratives here, some of which are quite intense and enjoyable, and others that maybe are unfulfilled. What Scott seems drawn to the most, though, is this relationship between Napoleon and his wife, Empress Josephine. Outside of the epic battles, which obviously we'll touch on, their dynamic, their relationship really is the most engaging part of this film. But even so, we don't dive in quite to the depth that we would like, if that is what the film is ultimately about. We see Napoleon and his interactions with Josephine, his unyielding love, or perhaps more aptly, his unyielding obsession, and also her response and subtle control of Napoleon. Like most of this film, Napoleon's character is interesting, it's multifaceted, but it's also underdeveloped at times. Occasionally, he comes across as more of a caricature than a real man. We have scenes of him acting like a wild animal or stumbling and falling, being the butt of the joke, even though he might not realize it. And I can't lie, it was funny. I was laughing out loud quite frequently in the theater as we watched these various blunders from Napoleon. But some of the laughs also felt a little bit cheap, and I don't think that I'm alone in maybe wanting a little bit more nuance and depth to this Napoleon character, who is ultimately one of the most polarizing figures in history. And as a result of this, I guess we're left with no clear individual to root for. Napoleon is a sympathetic character. We feel bad for him at times as we kind of see the behind the scenes intimate moments that we're allowed into, but we don't necessarily want him to win in the end, nor do we necessarily want these other generals or military leaders to win. And obviously, this is a historical piece, and so we know kind of the events that are going to unfold, but it would still be nice to have some stakes added to the film. Why do we ultimately really care about Napoleon? What are we wishing for, and what do we want to see? And look, this might seem like I'm down on the film so far, but that's not necessarily true. The battles, for example, were absolutely brilliant. The most epic being the Battle of Waterloo, where Ridley Scott had 11 different cameras all operating simultaneously while he was directing them from his trailer. A pretty impressive feat for a director in his 80s, and his vision is almost unmatched in this regard, bringing together complex choreography, bringing together all of these different moving pieces and understanding how they're going to show up on screen. This, of course, was aided by the DP, the cinematographer Dariusz Wolski, who has worked with Ridley Scott on multiple projects before, including things like The Martian, Alien Covenant, and more recently, The Last Duel. And it's clear that this is someone who is at the peak of his game. Again, choreographing this essentially elaborate dance is beyond impressive. We have cavalry, we have infantry, we have cannons going off, and all of this perfectly comes together. While there is some CGI in this film, the vast majority of the film was caught on camera. So between Scott and Wolski, the movement, the tension that's built in these battles is amazing. Beyond that, the production design and the costume design is very, very strong. When it comes to the costumes, the costume designers actually created around 4,000 different military uniforms, which is extraordinary. I'm certainly not an expert when it comes to historical dress, be it military or otherwise, but I did watch this film with my partner, who knows a lot more about that than I do, and she was really taken aback by the costuming here. Similarly, the production design is immersive. We have worlds being built from the very intimate inside Napoleon and Josephine's bedroom to these desolate Russian winters to grand epic battles. The performances here are also pretty strong. Vanessa Kirby is brilliant. She's been on a roll since 2021's Pieces of a Woman, and she continues her strong performances here. She does an amazing job of conveying subtlety in her facial expressions. We know so clearly what she is thinking of Napoleon in each and every moment, and we can watch her subtle control of him, even though he might not realize it at times. She's also probably the character that we empathize with the most. There are not too many characters in this film that we're kind of feeling with, and Josephine is one of the few. Napoleon's character, as I mentioned, is quite sympathetic, but I think that's an important distinction. We feel bad for Napoleon at times, or perhaps feel some secondhand embarrassment, but we don't really feel with him. We don't really relate to his actions because they are quite odd to the average person. Vanessa Kirby's performance as Josephine, though, is the most relatable, the most human performance that we get in this film. And look, Joaquin Phoenix is Joaquin Phoenix. I don't think that he's physically capable of giving a bad performance on screen, and of course, it's no exception here, even though it might not be one of my all-time favorite performances from Phoenix. He does what he is asked to do, and he does so brilliantly. He portrays a man who is insecure, a man who is hungry for power, a man who is, in many ways, a brilliant tactical military leader, and he's effective. Something that Phoenix maybe doesn't get enough credit for is his ability to bring comedy to the screen. His comedic timing was pretty impeccable, and there was actually some physical comedy here that Phoenix was able to portray adeptly on screen, and I was laughing quite often. Look, at the end of the day, this is an achievement in cinema. It is an epic film. It is technically extremely well produced and directed, but it just didn't resonate with me on any sort of emotional level. In fact, I much preferred Ridley Scott's 2021 film, The Last Duel, that for whatever reason, I can't quite seem to figure it out, was a pretty big flop at the box office. Both films are historical films, although The Last Duel is much more fictional, both set in France, both with very strong performances, but The Last Duel just connected a little bit more. So why go watch this film? Well, to be truthful, it's a pretty good film in terms of its educational content and the ability to learn about Napoleon. Beyond that, of course, you have these epic battles that are worth watching, and Vanessa Kirby's performance is also definitely worthwhile to spend some time with. Why maybe you shouldn't watch this film or not feel too bothered to go see it? It never quite makes up its mind about what it is. Is it a comedy? Is it a pure drama? Is it an action epic? It doesn't quite know. Still, this one, after it has its theatrical run, will be on Apple TV. So if you have a subscription there, then it still could be worth a watch. In the end, I give this film, Napoleon, 3 out of 5 stars. So thanks for watching. If you made it this far, feel free to do the subscribe thing, the like thing, the comment thing, all those things, and watch the next one. Sweet. Cheers.